And good evening. This is Mottek on Money. We're doing it live right here, weeknights in the 5 o'clock hour in Los Angeles. Mottek on Money 5 nights a week for you, live on the air here on 790 KBC, streaming live online worldwide at kbc.com, and the on-demand Mottek on Money podcast at kbc.com, Apple, iTunes, all your favorite podcast platforms. Stocks moving lower today. Some more money coming off the table ahead of the big announcement tomorrow. Well, the Federal Reserve will announce its decision on interest rates. No big surprise expected. It's widely expected. The Fed will leave its interest rate right where it's been after its meeting this week. The trouble is guessing exactly what comes next, and that'll be up to the Fed Chairman Jerome Powell to tell us all about that after the announcement on interest rates and a statement on the economy. The Fed Chairman himself will be holding a full-blown news conference, and that'll be happening at 11 o'clock our time tomorrow morning, and the Fed Chairman's news conference at 11:30 tomorrow morning. We did see stocks come off the worst sessions of the day. Oil prices, meanwhile, continue to hover the near highs of the year, and bond yields have moved higher. In fact, the yield in the 10-year note, which impacts fixed-rate mortgage rates, at a 16-year high today. Mortgage rates, meanwhile, hovering at about a 21 or 22-year high now. We'll talk about that later this evening with the mortgage expert Jeff LAZERSON, the president of MortgageRater.com, also Orange County Register real estate columnist. We're looking at the possibility of oil getting back to $100 a barrel. Inflation very much in focus, and that, of course, is what the Fed's concerned about. We'll be hearing a lot more about that tomorrow. In fact, gas prices soaring here in Southern California, in case you hadn't noticed, of 70 cents a gallon over the past month. Gas prices in L.A. right now, according to AAA, averaging $6.03 a gallon for regular. Premium has hit $6.32 a gallon on average, and diesel now at $6.46 a gallon on average. That diesel price now 65 cents a gallon higher than where it was a month ago. Inflation on full display, certainly, at Southern California gas pumps. Benchmark government bond yields hitting the highest seen in 16 years. Mortgage rates hovering at or near 22-year highs. We'll be discussing all of that tonight. Los Angeles County, meanwhile, mourning the loss of L.A. County Sheriff's Deputy Ryan Klinkenbroomer, who was shot and killed in an ambush shooting while in his patrol car in Palmdale over the weekend. An arrest has been made. Law enforcement, the business community, and the general public now rallying behind the deputy's family. You can donate to the Association of L.A. Deputy Sheriffs Care Foundation at alads.org. I'll discuss this tragedy and the crime situation here with the Honorable Dennis ZINE, the former the L.A. City Council member, former LAPD sergeant and current reserve LAPD officer. The Honorable Dennis ZINE will be joining me live later this hour. 5 U.S. detainees flying out of Iran this week in a swap for 5 Iranians held in the U.S. in a rare deal between arch enemies that also unfroze $6 billion of Iranian money. Let's discuss all this tonight with the one and only Steve Forbes, chairman and editor-in-chief of Forbes Media, which includes Forbes magazine, former Republican presidential candidate, and co-author of numerous books, including the latest, which is right on point. It's titled Inflation, What It Is, Why It Is Bad, and How to Fix It. Steve Forbes, thank you very much for coming to the line at this critical moment ahead of the big Fed meeting tomorrow and the big announcement. Give us your assessment of things here at the moment.
Well, good to be with you. In terms of the Fed, if they do raise interest rates, that's going to really throw a wrench in the markets. Usually the Fed in recent years signals in advance, i.e. they leak to certain journalists using code, what they're likely to do, whether they're going to raise rates or pause or do a big rate increase like they used to do, 75 basis points, 0.75 of a point. So they haven't done that this time. So the markets would be totally shocked. What they may signal, though, is that given the uncertainties with the economy from their point of view, they may want to signal that they're going to do it at their next meeting, which will happen in a few weeks. So, but what the Fed is doing, and this is important to understand, Frank, is they're still tightening. But instead of raising interest rates, what they're doing is withdrawing money from the banking system. That is, they're not, when a bond matures, they own a lot of bonds. When the bond matures, they're not going out and replacing it. So they've withdrawn over $1 trillion. They've reduced their balance sheet over $1 trillion in the last few months. And that process is continuing. So they're doing a backdoor tightening. They realize they just don't have to do it with interest rates.
What do you see ahead on inflation at this point, given the recent spike we've seen in gas and oil prices?
Well, that's because of the reduction of oil production in this country, and Russia and Saudi Arabia have reduced production. The Russians love it because the higher price makes it easier to bootleg their oil and to get more money to fight their barbarous war in Ukraine. Saudi Arabia still hasn't gotten over the smackdown that President Biden delivered for the first couple of years of his presidency. So they feel they owe him nothing in terms of oil. And so as a result, we are paying higher prices. We have demand, but we're not having the supply. This country could be, if we'd had a normal oil policy, gas policy, we'd be producing 2 million more barrels a day today, which would take a lot of pressure off of prices.
How much higher do you think interest rates will go in the face of this ongoing inflation?
Well, what I think they're going to do, even if they don't raise the rates by withdrawing money, that's why you're starting to see the interest rates go up, not just short term, which is amazing. It's over 5.5%, but also, as you mentioned just a few minutes ago, on the 10-year, reaching 4.3, 4.4, that could probably inch up even higher. And that's going to impact the housing market. We're starting to see that already. That's been discombobulated by having those low rates for a long time, so people are reluctant to give up 2 or 3% mortgages. And at the same time, people are finding that they may not be able to afford a house in this environment, especially with the uncertainty around. And then they get clobbered on rents. So people are not in a good mood. And when the president goes around saying, oh, you know, happy days are here again, no, they're not.
On the Air Live with Steve Forbes, and let me ask you about this Iran deal, which seemed to come out of nowhere, where the U.S. Unfroze $6 billion of Iranian money in a hostage exchange here. 5 U.S. detainees flying out of Iran in a swap for 5 Iranians held in the United States. Give us your reaction to what just happened with that.
Well, it's one thing to swap hostages, the prisoners we have. These are people who committed real crimes, versus the innocent people that Iran arrests from time to time. And so you can maybe justify a swap. It's good to see our people come home who've been illegally detained for years on end in Iranian prisons. But the payment of ransom, and that's what it is. Call it for what it is. Ransom, $6 billion, is just going to encourage more snapping up of U.S. people. You saw it in Russia with that Wall Street Journal reporter. You're going to see more in the months ahead, because we've we've made very clear we will pay up. So that's $6 billion. It's laughable when the U.S. says, oh, but they promised not to use it for their nuclear program and their military and their terrorism. They'll only use it for food and medicine. Well, as we all know, money is fungible. That is, it can be used for anything. That's $6 billion they didn't have before. That takes the pressure off of them in terms of their own domestic needs. And so it strengthens Iran at a time when it's still engaged in some very evil activities.
And given what's going on at the moment, you have a front row seat there in New York with the UN and so forth. Outrage as Iran's president prepares to address the UN. That was the headline. What's happening with that? And what about Iran's nuclear program? What's your assessment there?
Well, they're on the verge of being able to get create a nuclear device. They've slowed it down in recent weeks because they realize they can do it anytime they want, but they figure if they slow it down in the meantime, they can get more deals like they did with the hostage deal. That is, release more of the monies that have been detained because of their terrorist activities. They already got $6 billion. They probably figure they can get some tens of billions more by pretending to behave themselves short term. But this regime has been in power for 43 years. It always lies. It's always been engaged in revolutionary terrorism, and they're not going to change now. The same cast of characters is around, same kinds of evil people that took power 43 years ago. So that's not going to change. So Iran is on the verge of a nuclear weapon, but they do know that even if we're not willing to act, the Israelis will feel compelled to do so. So they're going to pick their time to do it, but in the meantime, they figure, let's get the money while it's good.
You probably heard the president's speech today at the UN, focused on Russia. And what about the Ukraine war, and what do you think is ultimately going to happen here? He was begging Russia to give back all the territory, but that doesn't seem to be the case here. How's this situation going to be resolved?
Aggressors don't give back territory unless they're forced to. and Putin still has 20% of the country, including Crimea, and he figures just wait us out. He sees the dissension in the U.S. about helping Ukraine. The tragedy here is, among others, is that if we'd provided Ukraine over a year ago with the weapons it needed, that is more anti-missile systems, more Patriot systems, F-16, so they can get control of the air instead of having the Russians roaming the way they do, anti-drone weapons and the like, they could have won this war. They could have thrown the Russians out of most of Ukraine. But for reasons of they worried that Putin will get mad at them if they do too much for Ukraine. So every major increase in weaponry from Ukraine has come from pressure, not the U.S. taking the lead, but Britain doing it, Poland, which figures it's going to be next on Putin's list for his menu, and the Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Sweden, which was neutral for 150 years, is now going all out. The British proposed a massive increase in their defense budget. They see for Putin what he is, an aggressor. And the only way you fight an aggressor is giving the victims of aggression the means to fight back and defeat them.
On the Air Live with Steve Forbes, and certainly on the domestic front, a lot to unpack on the political scene here with President Trump's legal challenges mounting. What is your assessment of how this is going to play out? Will there be any trials before the election? And give us your thoughts here about what's happening on that front. Well,
on the Republican front, the Democrats, the Justice Department, and their co-conspirators, I'll call them, in states like New York and Georgia, are determined to try to get the president on trial before.
Introducing Rich Valdez, America at Night, the podcast.
Welcome to the conversation, familia.
A perfect blend of news and entertainment, interviews and insights.
Eye-opening, nothing very surprising, but definitely eye-opening.
America's nighttime town hall whenever you want.
What else could it possibly mean?
Rich Valdez, America at Night.
Let's get to the meat and potatoes of it.
Follow the podcast wherever you listen.
And now for my next trick. I will combine the strength of hefty, ultra-strong trash bags with the joyfully clean scent of Fabuloso!
Wow! Smells like rainbows and unicorns!
Hefty, hefty, hefty!
Well, that turned out better than when I tried to split my assistant in half.
New hefty, ultra-strong trash bags with Fabuloso scent. So strong, so joyful, it must be magic.
The election. In a normal case, when you have especially 19 defendants, those things usually you don't get a trial for 8 months, 10 months, a year. And so I wouldn't be surprised if some of those trials are substantially delayed next year. And I also wouldn't be surprised if some of the indictments, like the one in New York, which is so flimsy that it'll ultimately get thrown out in a higher court. And the interesting thing, though, is on the Democratic side, you're already hearing rumblings about Joe Biden. He obviously his capacity is deteriorating. It's visible now. People are talking about it now in a way they never did before. It was hush-hush before. And I think you're going to see very real pressure early next year for President Biden to do what Lyndon Johnson did back in 1968, incumbent president, announced he's not going to decide. He's going to decide that he's not going to run for re-election. And the Democrats hope he can still manage to stay in office for the rest of this term. But given his visible deterioration, there's no way people are going to be convinced that he could do another 4 years. And so I think you're going to see pressure on him to pull out. And then it's going to be interesting who's going to jump in the race. And I think you know who aspirant number one is. He's living in Sacramento right now.
We're on the Air Live with Steve Forbes, and we can take a guess on that one, certainly. And while this is going on, the president's son, Hunter Biden, indicted on 3 felony gun charges. And by the way, the president's son now suing the IRS, alleges unlawful release of his taxes. What about that important case?
Well, the idea that Hunter Biden's privacy has been violated when he's flouted the tax laws and didn't report income and didn't obey gun laws and a lot of other things. Now he's saying his privacy has been violated. I think the law is clear. There have been articles on that no, this is just a diversionary tactic, a delay tactic, hopefully where things can be delayed so that ultimately his father in his last act in office, will pardon him. And but I think one of the reasons the pressure is growing on President Biden not to run for re-election, that is to withdraw next year, is precisely they're beginning to realize that there is a lot of fire behind the smoke about Hunter Biden's activities. We already know the president was not telling the truth when he said he'd do absolutely nothing about his son's activities, when he was involved with dinners, numerous phone calls, and the like. And I think they're worried about some damaging information coming out if this impeachment, which will, inquiry goes forward. So the pressure is going to grow on the president. There's too much baggage and an economy that's not doing very well, despite what the president's telling us.
Right, among the movers and shakers that you talk to, what is the mood on the economy at this point? And we've already seen a dip in consumer confidence, and not a big surprise historically when we see a jump in gas prices. Consumer confidence goes down. But what's your gut feeling on where this economy goes from here?
Well, the economy has shown amazing resilience despite all the abuses being put on it. But the regulations are going to start to take their toll. This administration's put on more regulations in a shorter period of time than almost any previous presidency in the last few decades, and that's beginning to take a toll, including proposing new capital requirements on banks, which means that they're going to have less willingness to lend. So the Federal Reserve is drawing reserves from the banking system. The banks are being told they may have to put aside more capital, and that means there's going to be less money to lend. And then you have interest rates going up. We all know what's happened to credit card rates. We all know what's happened to mortgage rates. And so this is not a good thing. So people are cautious. Some are going all out. Natural gas producers know there's a huge market for what they produce if they can just get the means to deliver the natural gas, what they call liquefied natural gas, to hungry customers in Europe and elsewhere.
We're in the middle of this, just about the end of the hot labor summer, about to be a hot labor autumn here pretty soon, with now the UAW strike, one of the biggest labor actions in decades, and the ongoing shutdown of Hollywood here with the writers' strike and the actors' strike continuing, and various other labor actions. What's your assessment of what's happening here in the U.S. On the labor front?
Well, whenever you have a period of sustained inflation, you get labor strife, you get labor unrest. We saw that after the two world wars when you had massive inflation financing those wars. You saw it back in the 1970s when we had the great inflation, a lot of labor strife, a lot of strikes and labor actions. So it's no surprise when the cost of living goes up in the 3-year period almost 20%, probably for most people 20-25%, you're going to have a lot of unhappy workers. So they have that overhanging it. But in terms of the UAW, United Auto Workers strike, rolling out strike, you might call it, against the auto industry, is the big three cannot afford what the union is asking for. In terms of electronic vehicles, which the government says we must all do in the next few years, which is utterly impossible, but they still have that fantasy. The only one who can come close to making money on EVs is Elon Musk and Tesla. And it's not just labor costs. Their productivity, their methods of manufacturing, the flexibility that he has is far, far, far ahead of Detroit. So here Detroit is surviving by selling SUVs and heavy trucks, pickup trucks, heavy pickup trucks. That's where they're getting the money to survive. Losing bundles of money. Ford's already said they're losing $4.5 billion on EVs. So they're supposed to go to a model of cars, EVs, that they're all losing money on. So the industry is going to be in as bad a straits or worse than what it was 15 years ago when it nearly went bust. I think the administration will, behind the scenes, force the auto industry to make a deal with the UAW. But I guarantee you, in a couple of years, if the changes aren't made, you're going to find ourselves back to cries to bail out the big three.
All right, and we remember those days during the financial crisis when the automakers got that bailout. Ford did not get the bailout right, but the others did.
But Ford did get some loans and things like that, so they got a little bit of help as well. But they did not take the overt bailout money the way, as you point out, Chrysler, as they called it then, and General Motors did.
Right. So we might see a similar situation play out. That is certainly a very viable scenario at this point, given the labor unrest there with the UAW going after all three of the automakers at this point. I wish we had more time, as always, Steve Forbes, and hopefully we'll arrange for an hour, if that's okay with you sometime. It's always a pleasure to speak with you. Steve Forbes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us live here tonight.
Thank you.
That is Steve Forbes, of course, the former Republican presidential candidate, chairman of Forbes Media, which includes Forbes magazine. The title of his new book is Inflation, What It Is, Why It Is Bad, and How to Fix It. Live with us here tonight on Mottek on Money on 790 KBC. Folks, let's be honest. Sometimes we find ourselves or a loved one dealing with a massive injury caused by a terrible accident by no fault of our own. Sometimes it's simply being the wrong place at the wrong time. We're all good at preparing for earthquakes and fires, but let's not forget to prepare in case we're involved in a major accident. It's critical to know who to call first. Attorney Clark Fielding became a lawyer to help you in a crisis. Fielding Law is focused on justice and resources for you because they understand how the system works and what to do in the most horrific situations. I always say to put the Fielding Law team in your phone under the word accident, so all you have to do is hit dial. Believe me, you'll feel better having set this up in advance for yourself and your family. The number is 833-88-SHARK. That's 833-88-SHARK. With the population exploding and increased vehicles on the freeways, be proactive, prepare for the worst, and expect the best. But if and when you need help, call Clark and his team of sharks. The number is 833-88-SHARK, 833-88-SHARK, or go to clarkthesharklaw.com. Again, that's clarkthesharklaw.com. Mottek on Money continues on 790 KBC. Good evening. Money coming off the table ahead of the big Fed announcement tomorrow on interest rates and a statement on the economy and a full-blown news conference from Fed Chairman Jerome Powell will be in the spotlight. The Dow coming in for a closing loss of 107 points today at 34,518. The S&P 500 down 9.5 at 4,444. And the NASDAQ down 32 at 13,678. The yield on the 10-year note, which impacts the fixed-rate mortgage rates out there, hitting a 16-year high today at 4.36%. Mortgage rates, meanwhile, hovering at more than 20-year highs. We'll get the latest on that tonight from mortgage expert Jeff LAZERSON, the president of MortgageGrader.com and Orange County Registered real estate columnist. Taking a look at the auto stocks, they rebounded a bit today as the UAW strike continues. GM shares of 62 cents at 33 and change. Ford of 22 cents, 12.56, and Stellantis moving up 39 cents at 19.34. Price of oil hovering above $90 a barrel. Gas prices soaring here in Los Angeles, moving up again overnight. Right now, $6.03, the average price for regular gas in the L.A. Long Beach area. Premium at $6.32, both about 70 cents a gallon higher than what you were paying just a month ago. And diesel now at $6.46 on average, 65 cents a gallon higher than what truckers were paying just a month ago. Shares of NIO pulling back 17 cents after the Chinese EV maker announced a convertible bond offering. Half of the $1 billion debt offering will come due in 2029 and the other half in 2030. According to MarketWatch, money from the bonds intended to buy back a portion of other debt securities while also strengthening the balance sheet at NIO, which is considered the Tesla of China. Carnival Corporation shares edging higher after a stock upgrade from an analyst who's been bearish on the cruise operators. Strong booking trends and signs of strength in the cruise market were reason for the analyst upgrade. Mottek on Money continues here, 790 KBC. Turning now to real estate, some new readings. Rising mortgage rates and a continued shortage of homes for sale hampered Los Angeles and Orange County area home sales for the third month in a row in August, while the statewide median home price saw its biggest year-over-year gain in more than a year, according to the California Association of Realtors in its latest report this week. In the L.A. metro area, the median sale price of a single-family home was $792,500 last month, up from $790,000 in July and up from $765,000 in August of last year, according to the Realtors. L.A. County saw single-family home prices of $882,020 in August. That's up from the previous month and up from the $854,960 median sale price reported 1 year ago. Keeping track of all this, as well as mortgage rates, which have hit 22-year highs, let's bring in the expert now, Jeff LAZERSON, with the laser focus on mortgage rates and real estate.
Stacking Benjamins with Joe and his good friend OG not only has great financial insight, it's laid back with humor too.
The Len Penzo sandwich survey.
I wanted to know, was it really cheaper to brown bag it every day, or was it cheaper to go through the school lunch?
And the most expensive sandwich of all.
46% increase. This is the first time a sandwich has ever touched $5. Before anybody gags on that, though, it's a great sandwich.
Find out more by searching the Stacking Benjamins podcast wherever you listen.
State president of MortgageGrader.com and Orange County Register real estate columnist. Jeff, thank you very much for taking the call here on the rates, first of all, which have been eye-popping lately. Give us an update on how they're looking this evening.
Eye-popping is the word, Frank. The 30-year fixed is at 6.75% at one point. The 15-year fixed is at 6.38% at one point, and that's up to $726,200 Fannie Mae conforming rates, 726,201 to $1,089,300 in LA and Orange County. It's 7.38% for a 30-year fixed, and the agency high balance 15 years at 7%. Jumbo rates are just slightly higher than that at 7.125%, and FHA VA is down at 6.38%. Prime rates at about it is 8.5% right now.
Right, and tomorrow we'll see if it goes any higher when we get that decision from the Federal Reserve. Where do you see the rates, the mortgage rates go from here, Jen?
Well, Fed's not going to change anything tomorrow. They're probably going to move closer to the end of the year. I think in the November meeting, that would be my best guess, is they're going to raise another quarter then. Mortgage rates are going to go up some more. We're going to peak out somewhere, the Freddie last week was at 7.18%, and this week when they announced Thursday morning, my expectation is Freddie will probably be, 7.2, 7.3, but by the end of the year, we're going to be somewhere around 7.5%. So we're going to peak somewhere at the end of the year, first quarter, and then we're going to see a hard crash in rates.
At some point, they will come down?
Oh, yeah. And so we can only hope and pray.
Right, we'll keep our fingers crossed.
Yeah, but Frank, it is eerily quiet again when rates hit over 7% a month or two ago. Again, when the Freddie rate went that high, it wasn't busy at all this year, but it's just gotten super quiet again. And that whole Maytag repairman thing, it's just there are people buying, and they're just paying whatever. I had one of my realtors told me a 40-year-old house in Woodbridge, $1 million. It was a tired house, 40 years old, just kind of a dumpy place, listed at $1 million. Client comes in at $1.1 million, all cash, and he gets beat out because somebody else comes in at $1.2 million. And and that's what I'm hearing all over again, is that things are getting overbid again. It not because it's anything great, it's just because there's nothing to buy, and there are people out there with money, and that's where we're at again.
All right, and are companies coming in and buying these low-end properties and renting them out? Are you seeing more of that here?
No, I don't. I don't really see that happening. It doesn't. It's really hard to make that stuff pencil anymore because, don't get me wrong, rents are really good, but the internal rate of return on for the amount of money you got to put out and the rents that you're going to get, and effectively the net earnings after taxes and insurance and management fees, it doesn't make sense, and we are not seeing it here in Southern California. It may be going on in other parts of the country, but not here, not now, and I don't think for a long time.
Interesting, in that latest California Association of Realtors report, they noted home sales were down 29.2% in August compared to a year ago. Home prices, as I mentioned, moving higher in all this. Some interesting dynamics happening here. Obviously, affordability and availability, obviously the two big issues here continuing in a very competitive housing market given what's out there.
Yeah, and Frank, it's not even going to change. Even when I see we're going to hit a hard landing maybe second quarter next year, the unemployment, as it's going up and it spikes further, and you're going to have job losses and this and that. I think what's going to be different this time around in other markets, when people lost their jobs, they would sell their houses and, move on, do what they had to do because they were out of money. This time around, I don't really even see that happening. I think what's going to happen is people that are in dire situations, they're going to figure out that they can rent their houses out for more and go downsize another house to rent. So their property that they own and were living in, they'll downsize and it'll make it more affordable. They'll be able to keep their property with a really cheap interest rate and cheap property tax and find something smaller to rent until things get better. So unlike previous downturns when this recession hits next year, I just don't really see a lot of – there'll be more on the market, but not like a plethora of properties. It's just not going to be like that.
All right, with all this labor stuff going on, Jeff, with Hollywood shut down, is that starting to have an impact here on the housing market?
Yes. I mean, it's been having an impact, and I would even say that people in the real estate industry have had more of an impact. It's maybe not as obvious because it's been just a slow bleed for, a year and a half now. But there's 18 to 20% of the GDP is real estate or real estate related industries, and not to take anything away from the pain that the folks in the entertainment world are going through. I know they're going through a lot of stuff, and I got plenty of clients that are in that business that I've been hearing from. But I just think anything real estate related, furniture stores, construction starting to slow down on the, home improvement stuff, and separate from all the people in the real estate industry, and it's taken its toll on things. So it's just sort of this slow, quiet bleed that's going to really, open up next year in not a good way.
Slow and quiet until it's not. That's how it always is, right? So, Jeff,
Yep.
Thank you very much for taking the call here tonight. Jeff LAZERSON, the president of MortgageGrader.com, an Orange County registered real estate columnist. We'll be looking for your column this weekend, Jeff. Thanks very much for joining us live here tonight.
Thanks, Frank, for having me.
Thanks very much. Friends, I'm not exaggerating when I say this. QC Kinetics can change your life. You can live again without that chronic joint pain and without drugs or surgery. Frank Mottek here. QC Kinetics is advanced regenerative medicine. They take your body's own concentrated healing properties and put them right into your joint to restore and repair that damaged tissue that's causing all of that pain. The patient satisfaction reports are absolutely astonishing. Finally, a real alternative to the old ways of dealing with pain. And unlike surgery, there is no downtime with QC treatments. Now, if you have constant pain in your knees, hips, shoulders, or back, you need to call and get a free consultation from the medical professionals at QC Kinetics today. Imagine this autumn moving around pain-free, doing things you love again. Walking, hiking, playing with the grandkids, going to the pumpkin patch, you name it. Call QC Kinetics and see how the latest advances in precision regenerative medicine can attack your pain and bring you lasting relief. QC Kinetics, locations in Glendale, the city of Orange, Mission Viejo, and now also in Costa Mesa. 213-997-PAIN. 213-997-PAIN. Again, that's 213-997-PAIN. Mottek on Money continues here in 790 KBC. We join Los Angeles County in mourning the loss of L.A. County Sheriff's Deputy Ryan Klinkenbrummer, who was shot and killed in an ambush shooting while in his patrol car in Palmdale over the weekend. Law enforcement, the entire business community, and general public now rallying behind the deputy's family, and you can donate to the Association of L.A. Deputy Sheriff's Care Foundation at alads.org. Joining me live now is the Honorable Dennis ZINE, former Los Angeles City Council member, former LAPD sergeant, and current reserve LAPD officer. Dennis ZINE, thank you very much for taking the call and give us your reaction to this terrible tragedy that's taken place.
Well, Frank, this was simply a murder. This wasn't provoked any way, shape, or form. This was a murder. And how an individual, allegedly, because of his parents' statements, has mental issues, has possession of a weapon, a gun, and drives down a street and sees a black and white police car with a uniformed deputy and just shoots him in the head and kills him. I mean, this is outrageous that this happens in our, what we call civilized society. It is absolutely outrageous. And then the parents talk about his mental problems. Well, if he's got mental problems, maybe he shouldn't have a gun. He's living with you under the same roof, and he has a gun, maybe more than one. So the parents hold responsibility. He is an adult by age. But the fact of the matter is, here's a young deputy, and I've got a son who's on the Los Angeles Police Department, so I really empathize with this, with a granddaddy, and then the father, and then now you've got the young deputy who is killed, and you've got the two other generations that served admirably with the LA County Sheriff's Department. So this hits home to a lot of folks in law enforcement, where many of us have relatives who wear that badge. That badge means you're going to protect and serve. But this wasn't a traffic stop. This was simply a deputy in a car stopped at a red light and gets executed, murder, by this individual. I don't care what the factor of his mental capacity, there is absolutely no excuse, no reason. And our legislators in Sacramento try to do everything to let these people out of jail and not incarcerate them for the benefit of society. This is pathetic, what has happened. But I'm glad that the man is in custody. I'm glad that he admitted, which saves a lot of effort. But what happens next is he's going to go to a mental institution for the rest of his life at the expense of the taxpayers because he's got a problem. But what about the young officer who was recently engaged, and his nickname was Clink? And to see what his relatives and his loved ones are for the rest of their lives because of this vicious act, totally unprovoked by this vicious murderer. Pure and simple, a vicious murderer.
So heartbreaking. We heard the Sheriff Luna call the deputy's death a targeted ambush killing, saying the deputy was murdered, ambushed by a coward who's supposed to be appearing in court tomorrow, and that's going to be big news tomorrow, of course.
Well, it will be, but the fact is he admits guilt. Okay, so he admits guilt, but what about the deputy, a young deputy who's about to get married, and his whole life's ahead of him? He's right. I think he joined the Sheriff's Department around 21 years of age. And this was his career, but following in his daddy's footsteps and his grandfather's footsteps. It just breaks my heart to think what this family is going through. And his colleagues with the LA County Sheriff's Department, doesn't matter if you're LAPD or Sheriff or Santa Monica, Beverly Hills, whatever. You're in law enforcement. You wear that badge, and you wear that badge to protect society, plain and simple. But for let this happen is absolutely, completely outrageous. And for them to let him have a gun, his parents let him have a gun, whatever he had, somehow he had a gun, and they knew he had problems. So, and he's living under their roof. So how does he have possession of a gun, and how do they know about what's going on? I can't tell you the outrage that I feel when this situation first took place, and I heard it on the news, and it was earth-shattering. But fortunately, they caught the individual before he went out and killed anyone else, killed another deputy or an individual because he's got mental problems. Well, believe me, I'm sure there's a lot of people in this world that have mental problems, and those people need to be confined to stay away from the rest of us that don't have mental problems, and our children and our aunts and our uncles. I mean, we need to have a civilized society. But this excuse that he's got mental problems, there's no excuse for murder. Absolutely no excuse for murder.
Absolutely right. Now, we're seeing law enforcement, the business community, and the general public rallying in this situation here to help this family, Dennis ZINE. People are being encouraged to donate to the Association of LA Deputy Sheriffs Care Foundation at alads.org. Any other ideas on how people can help?
Well, that's the best thing they can do. I mean, I'm sure there's expenses. I'm sure the Sheriff's Department, the county, you die on duty, they're going to take care of all that. But whatever bills he has, whatever credit he has to take care of. And, I can't explain the financial impact. If we say there's a blessing, there's no young children that are going to suffer without their dad. But the fact is he was on the threshold of getting married and probably having a family. So contributions obviously welcome, and it helps the family. It helps them with the expenses that they have to incur because of this tragic murder. And it's not a death, it's a murder. Plain, vicious, first-degree murder. That's exactly what it was.
On the air with Dennis ZINE, and on the crime situation overall here, Dennis, I think you laid it out very effectively as always, the outrage here at this point.
Well, you know what, Frank? They used to have shoplifting. Well, now shoplifting has turned into elevated to smash and grab. And what we see is an elevation of violence where a person would shoplift. And it used to be if you committed a shoplift and got caught, the second and subsequent were a felony. Well, because of Gascon and his asinine policies, you can go shoplifting all you want. But now, don't go shoplifting. We just go and break the windows and break the cabinets and go out and just loot all we want. It's escalated. And what we see is this escalation of lawlessness. And then they say, well, back off the police. The big term that the LAPD now uses is de-escalate. It's pathetic. And then Black Lives Matter goes out and criticizes the chief of police and wants him to resign. I mean, they'd love to see all the police officers resign. because they have an agenda, and their agenda isn't for the public good. But the problem is the laws are not being enforced. The laws are too weak, and our state legislators are culpable of everything that's going on with the legislation that they're proposing to let convicted murderers who are in prison, they want to let them out because they've served time in prison. You've been convicted of murder, and you get a life sentence, and we want to let you out now because 20 years have passed? Well, what about the family of the grieving person who died, who was stabbed or shot? What about that family? I mean, the legislators, I blame this on the legislators. I blame this on Gascon. And anybody who wants to vote for Gascon when he runs for re-election, which he's doing, you got to have your head examined because you may be the next victim because of Gascon's asinine policies on prosecution of criminals. I'm talking about vicious criminals.
The Honorable Dennis ZINE, thank you very much for joining us live here, Dennis, with that heartfelt reaction to this tragedy here and this murder. Former L.A. City Council member, former LAPD sergeant, current reserve LAPD officer with more than 50 years of service to Los Angeles. Live with us here tonight on Mottek on Money on 790 KBC.
Former Navy SEAL Sean Ryan shares real stories from real people from all walks of life on The Sean Ryan Show. Guest Brandon Fugel.
Now, Skinwalker Ranch is the most Googled location in the entire world.
For whatever reason, we're seeing the highest level of UFO sightings and paranormal activity. And this has been going on for decades, if not millennia. And we're finally bringing it to the public's attention.
The Sean Ryan Show on YouTube or wherever you listen.